All right, welcome to this video. This is a series that we've developed that focuses on learning how to taste blind wines at the WSET Level 3. So the skills here are really to kind of help you understand how to taste blind, follow along and calibrate to how we taste, and then ultimately grade our Level 3 exam papers. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to go through a tasting note for a particular wine, do it just as I would if it was on an exam or if I'm doing my own tasting note. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a pause, give you a second to kind of consolidate your own notes, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about the wine and what exactly it is. So let's get started. All right, so this wine that I have with me today, white wine, as you can probably tell, and this wine is clear. It is got a medium intensity, and it's got a lot of lemon color. It's kind of on the fuller side of lemon, almost to gold. Although I don't see really any like tawny or brown edges to it. So there's no real brown or amber creeping in here. So I'm going to keep it at lemon. I'm not going to gold quite yet, but it is definitely it's definitely at the farther end of lemon, not to be terribly confusing, but it is medium intensity and lemon. All right, condition on the nose, clean, nothing off here. I am getting a lot of aromatics though, so I'm going to put my intensity level at medium plus because there's just a fair amount of aromatics jumping out of this glass, and I've already got a list going in my head of things that are here, and I'm working my way down. So it's pretty easy to tell. I don't have to dig deep for this wine to pick up a lot of things. From a quality development point of view, I would say this wine is actually developing because I am picking up secondary aromas and maybe even a touch of tertiary. So we're going to go through this a little bit. It's got a lot of youthful fruit, but I think there's some development going on here. Nothing terribly aged, but I think it's starting to kind of move along, and it's got a lot of those secondary aromas that come out. So let's talk about what it has. So on the nose, I'm getting a lot of kind of rounder fruit flavors that are based around tree fruits. So there's a little bit of elderflower, kind of a floral thing going on here, but that's backed up pretty heavily by a lot of golden apple. There's a lemon kind of custard almost kind of quality to it, and ripe peach, ripe apricot. There's a lot of kind of rich flavors, and that's what I was saying a minute ago about the intensity kind of coming out of this. I marked it up as a medium plus because there's just a lot of this sort of almost like rich tree fruit flavor that's coming out, and also an edge of pineapple. So tropical kind of aspect kind of creeps in here to a ripe pineapple. A little bit of whetstone perhaps, but then I got to move on to the secondary, and this wine really kind of has a lot of the hallmarks of some barrel fermentation as well as barrel aging. So biscuit, bread, toast aromas, definitely butter, and just a lot of kind of saturation with vanilla, cloves, toast, everything you might expect from a wine that has spent a fair amount of time both probably fermenting in oak, getting that butter, slight dairy kind of quality to it, as well as some time aging in oak, and picking up all that sort of, I would almost call it lush vanilla kind of flavors. So let's give it a taste and see what, I'm also picking up a little bit of, before I move on, I'm picking up a little bit of like almost a nutshell kind of quality. There's a slight, and we'll see what happens on the palate, but there's a slight sort of concentrated apple, hazelnutty kind of quality, something that maybe is starting to creep in with that tertiary. And that's where my development call before as being a wine that is developing kind of comes forward, because I do get that slight aspect of a little bit of interaction with oxygen, which would come from some barrel aging, and the fact that the wine probably has had a little bit of aging after that. So I'm picking up definitely a lot of primary, a lot of secondary, and even a touch of tertiary aromas here. So let's actually move on to tasting it now. All right, it's kind of a mouthful. So the wine's technically dry, although there's a lushness to it that I think would kind of confuse some folks and maybe call it off dry. I think ultimately this wine is dry, maybe off dry. I could go either way on that. There's probably a little bit of residual sugar here that could qualify for being off dry, but technically I'm going to call this wine as dry. Acid level, there's a little bit of watering here, but I still think it's medium. It's not as high as I would expect and have experienced with other wines that have that have a fairly, high and focused kind of acid. There's a balance here, there's a lushness here, but I'm calling acid as medium. It kind of goes away pretty quickly, and I can control it pretty easily on my palate. Alcohol, there's a lot of alcohol here. It's very warming. I get a cooling sensation on my palate when I inhale. And all of this kind of comes together with that sort of moderate acidity level, but higher alcohol and this weight. For body, medium plus. This wine it's got a presence on my palate. The flavor intensity, just like above, I think I'm calling this as medium plus because I'm tasting a lot of flavors here as well as when I smelled them before. And the finish, I'm tasting the apple, I'm tasting the vanilla, I'm tasting these flavors for quite some time. So I'm going to call my finish as medium plus as well. So there's kind of a lot going on here. And the flavor characteristics that I'm actually picking up, there's a lot of that apple, there's a lot of that sort of ripe peach flavor and hint of lemon zest on the side, but it's all kind of being dominated a little bit by this vanilla, this butter, and a little bit of like that nutshell, that hazelnut, that raw almond kind of quality. So I am picking up aspects in the primary, in the secondary, and the tertiary, both on the nose and on the palate. There's a lot going on here. Fairly complex wine. But I think in my mind, and now I'm kind of moving into my conclusion aspect, all of these flavors are kind of separated. They're not really working in harmony. So when I start thinking about balance, I think there's an awkwardness to the alcohol. I think there's a little falling off of the acidity. And then I'm kind of tasting all of these flavors sort of independently in a row. And to me, that doesn't really create an overall feel of a wine that's got true balance and true harmony. Yes, it's seen some wood. That's something that generally is going to imply a little bit of a higher quality wine. And certainly we can go there because it does have all of that and it delivers a lot of layers. I think I'm going to give it higher marks for complexity, but the intensity level, yes, it's up there, but it's a little disjointed and it's not consolidated in my mind. And so to me, this wine really has just a few shortcomings that are not going to allow me to give it a super high quality assessment. So I think I'm actually falling into the good because my balance is off a little bit. The intensity and the length are up there. Complexity is okay. Maybe very good, but I feel like there's just an awkwardness and just disjointedness to this wine that really, it's kind of dominated by this butter vanilla aspect, and all the fruit falls away fairly quickly. So it's an attempt, I think, to make a wine that's pretty showy. It does deliver that. But for me, the fulfillment of the balance, length, intensity, complexity is just pulling back a little bit. So good for me. I do think it's a wine that might actually come around for a bit, in a bit. So I'm going to call this as something that you can certainly drink now, but probably has a potential to age for a few years. And hopefully those things kind of come together. I hope the fruit kind of lasts and stays with this wine through that bitterness and that overt sort of vanilla quality that's there, which at the moment is really just kind of coming through a little bit more on the palate as a bitter aspect. So hopefully it comes through. But my call here today for quality is good, and the level of readiness is you can drink it now, but probably has the potential to age and hopefully age better than what we have now, which is the idea. So, all right, take a minute, think about what this wine is, and we'll come back in a second and talk about what it actually is. All right, so what is this wine? I think one of the clues that if you're trying to guess the wine and as you're tasting through it, might reveal is there was a lot of apple, there's a lot of vanilla, there's a lot of tropical kind of aspects to it. So not a lot of grape varieties out there are going to be, white grape varieties at least, are going to be aged in oak the way this is. And really we can eliminate a lot of the higher aromatic and higher acid wines, such as Rieslings, most Pinot Gris, Chenin sometimes could be done like this, but not to this sort of lushness. And this is This is to me because it's got a high profile, big flavor profile. It's coming from a New World kind of producer. So really, I almost feel like you put your nose in the glass, that apple, that vanilla, that everything kind of leads to Chardonnay, which is what it is. And not only that, but Chardonnay from a New World producer that is giving it some treatment with oak barrels. And this, in fact, is from Monterey. It's called Madalena Chardonnay. It's from the 2020 vintage. And they actually call this their estate reserve. So estate does actually have a meaning in California. Reserve doesn't really have a legal meaning, although from producers such as this, I think you can kind of infer that they're giving it an elevated status within their hierarchy because of that. So the thing that does stand out for me is that this wine is 14.9% alcohol. So Monterey, relatively warm growing region, producing high alcohol type wines with a lot of sugar, a lot of flavor development because of that high sugar. And yeah, so the alcohol kind of stands out. And then they put it in oak. They probably barrel fermented it and then put it in oak to age for a period of time, picking up a lot of that intense flavor. I think still at the moment though, it's just starting to develop and it's a little disjointed. So that's why I say I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with this wine in a couple of years, because if that bitterness sort of settles down, the flavors of the apple and whatnot are allowed to come forward a little bit more, it actually could probably step up in my mind to being a very good quality wine, which is I think what they're intending this to be. Interesting wine, gives us a big example in contrast to unoaked wines because there is so much oak here. Butter, vanilla, etc. That it's a great example to kind of reference when you're really trying to understand how oak and oak aging impacted the style of the wine. So Madalena 2020 Chardonnay from Monterey. Enjoy.